Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. So, light him if you got him. Amendment 64, passed overwhelmingly, and pot's going to be a part of our life, like it or not. So, how do we regulate it? What's it look like? The legislature is going to have to decide it all coming up here in just a month or so. To talk about it from the Reason Foundation, Harris Kenny, thank you for joining us here.
Thanks for having me on, John.
And from the 64 campaign itself, Joe Megyesy, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, John.
All right, first of all, let me tell you what the one thing that surprised me on this election was 64. I thought it would fail by a point, maybe 2 points, and at which point we'd say it's gonna pass next time. We better start having a real discussion about this, and I was looking forward to that. It didn't just pass; it got 55%. I didn't see that coming. You?
No, I have to admit, I didn't see it coming either. You know, we were confident going in the last month or so. We had momentum on our side, and our polling data looked good all the way going up to Election Day. But honestly, I didn't think it was going to win by that overwhelming of a margin. But I think people in Colorado have an independent Western spirit that they were ready to tell the government to get out of their personal lives.
Why is it, though, that was it 6 years ago that you guys tried it before, and it got killed 60-40? What gave it a 15-point bump this year? I
mean, this campaign was a much more professional campaign run against a much more well-founded and better-written amendment. In 2006, it was basically a one-line amendment that said, you know, marijuana should be legalized for all adults. We had a much more comprehensive amendment written this time, and we had a much broader coalition of people working on the campaign and much broader support, and we just ran. It was a much more professional, well-oiled campaign than we ran in 2006.
Yeah, but there was a change, and I think having medical marijuana here for a decade, and maybe people don't like the little shop at the store in their neighborhood, but nothing evil has happened here in Colorado. The gang wars haven't been over pot; they've been over other stuff. Did you expect this to win?
I didn't. I was speaking with a reporter the day before the election, and I actually did a radio show the day of. It was a Hispanic radio show, and everybody was calling in against it.
Habla español?
Poquito. Yeah, it was, and I was surprised. I didn't think, even the day of, the response I was getting from the Hispanic community made me think, I don't know. And even though nationwide a majority of Americans support legalizing marijuana, I just didn't know if Colorado would be ready to be the first. And so it makes me wonder if Colorado is maybe more of a blue state than a purple state.
I'm pretty sure it's a blue state. Let's see, Democratic governor, Democratic House, Democratic senator, 2 Democratic U.S. Yeah, it's blue. It ain't purple, it's blue. All right, now that it passed, it says it gives the authority to the state legislature to regulate it like alcohol. What does that mean?
So, Amendment 64 did three major things. The first thing it did is it gave a constitutional right to adults 21 and over to possess a limited amount of marijuana and to grow a limited amount of marijuana on private property. The second thing it does is it directs the state to enact a regulatory framework to allow for the cultivation and retail sale of marijuana. So that's what the legislature is going to do in this upcoming session. Amendment 64 actually mandates a pretty tight timeline. They have to be finished with these rules by July 1st. And those rules have to be done at the Department of Revenue and else, by that time. And if they're not finished by July 1st, then local governments can start issuing their own licenses for retail and grow operations by October 1st.
So in other words, Colorado Springs could shut it down completely, and Boulder could make it a tourist destination. So you're pretty certain that the legislature is going to set up the framework of what this is going to look like?
Yes, I am.
All right. What about the tax implications? The AG here said if you want to tax this, give it a higher tax, not just a sales tax, you're going to have to go back to the vote of the people based by the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which is great. I mean, we'll be a tourist destination, duty-free pot. Come to Colorado. Do people pass that? When do we ask?
We ask next November, and I think people do pass that, yes. They voted, 55% of the people of Colorado voted for this amendment. I think they'll vote for the tax as well.
How much can they tax it? What's the highest level?
They can tax it at 15% excise tax.
All right,
and that's capped until 2017, and then that can be raised to whatever
to whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is an opportunity. Reason Foundation has long been a supporter of decriminalizing marijuana. Here's a great opportunity. We've got this blank slate. What do you want to see happen when the regulations start? I mean, or there's some people say, I don't want any regulation at all. Just let us do what we want. What is it the state's supposed to do?
Well, the most important way to think about this is that there's already a market for marijuana. It's just a black market. And so what the state has a window here is to set up an effective legal market to regulate marijuana like alcohol. Fortunately, Colorado took a tax and regulate approach versus a state-run store approach.
What do you mean? I'm not following.
So when alcohol prohibition was repealed about 80 years ago, states could go one of two ways. 30 states chose tax and regulate, which is where you let it be like any other business. 20 states chose to open state-run liquor stores or state-run directed wholesale. In that period, in that 75-year period, only 2 states have gone to tax and regulate, or that's what we think of when we think of normal market operations. Oregon tried a state-run model and it failed. Washington and Colorado did tax and regulate, so that's good. That's the good news. Now it's how effectively can the state set this up to compete with the black market and get people to come basically into the above-ground market, above-ground economy. So they're competing against that. They have a very effective distribution system, lots of entrepreneurs dealing all over the state.
Yeah, here's the obvious question. All right, it's legal for me to have an ounce. It's legal for me to grow 6 plants, is that it?
Up to 6 plants.
Up to 6 plants. I can't keep a plant alive to save my life. So will there be wholesalers, retailers? Will there be, instead of corn farms somewhere, marijuana farms somewhere in Colorado with a large-scale distribution system that's above board? Will it be able to be sold in King Soopers along with the cigarettes? How do I get that ounce legally?
Well, there will be, if the legislature does move ahead and enact these regulations, by January 1st of next year, 2014, they will start issuing licenses for the retail operations. So you'll be able to walk into a marijuana store much like you'd be able to walk into an alcohol store.
Does it have to be its own freestanding or its own marijuana shop? It can't be marijuana and ice cream. It can't be marijuana and tennis rackets. It's just pot.
There's nothing in the amendment that stipulates that, so that's regulations that need to be developed by the state legislature.
All right, let me throw out my big worry about this. The idea of regulating pot like alcohol was a great slogan. It made great sense. I loved your little sign that says regulation works. Regulation doesn't work. All right, I'm concerned that weed is going to actually be regulated like alcohol, and the alcohol regulations in this state are ass backwards. They're nuts. It is the only retail shop where you can only own 1 license. That is, you know, if I had a restaurant, and those require health code licenses and all the rest, I can open up a chain. I can have as many as I like. I can get those economies of scale, all those great stuff. But if I own a liquor store, one person, 1 liquor store, you can't combine, you can't sell it at King Soopers, you can't have any of that stuff. Wholesalers are only allowed to sell to retailers. They're not allowed to sell directly to the public. Retailers have fights then with the smaller breweries, and Colorado has more breweries per capita than any other state because we have such a great microbrew world. I don't want to regulate it like alcohol. I think that's been a huge failure. But is it going to be regulated just like alcohol? What's the process? I know the governor's looking at this. What's it going to do?
So the governor is putting together a task force that she announced this week. I think the most likely prevention against that sort of onerous draconian regulation that we have in alcohol is that there is an out clause within Amendment 64 that allows home cultivation of up to 6 plants and transfer of up to an ounce between individuals above 21. So
in other words, if I have 6 plants,
yes,
and they're producing, and I'm harvesting, and I get an ounce, I can go ahead and sell that without going through the process.
You can't sell it.
You can transfer it to another adult without remuneration, but you cannot sell it.
So you can give it to me, but you can't sell it. So the state's competing with the black market, and now there's a new opportunity for, and I don't know what this might look like, but maybe nonprofit co-op type setup where people are transferring between a membership organization, but that would be legal. And so the state's
incentive. In other words, I could have a not-for-profit collection center. Hey, give us your extra weed, and we'll give it to the homeless.
Potentially. I'm not a lawyer, so this is not like I'm not giving business advice, but potentially. So hopefully those 2 pressures, the existing black market and the opportunity to transfer, will incentivize the state to set up reasonable regulation, which means allowing franchises, allowing multiple ownership, allowing normal regulation on the business side, and then consumer regulation, which people think when they go to the liquor store, they don't understand the back-end business regulation. So hopefully it'll be good regulation on both sides of the cash register.
You know, I'm thinking if they were allowed to franchise, just like any other business, dry cleaners to restaurants to whatever, over time we're going to have a lot of these little pot shops, and then it's going to start conglomerating as businesses do. And we'll end up with 3 or 4 chains or bigger companies and a few startups here and there. And I think that would be easier for the law to keep an eye on, to keep an eye on the books, all the rest. Am I wrong on this?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, maybe that's what we'll see when we're going ahead in the legislature with lobbying this, going forward with this implementation. And we're going to have this great opportunity to have this discussion about how this substance should be regulated. If it really should be regulated exactly like alcohol, or we should perhaps have some nuances in how we implement this, the rules and regulations.
The state can allow for large-scale operations, right? I mean, they can do it any way they want.
Yes.
Or they can say, no, you can only have one store and you can only sell 1 ounce a day, something like that.
I mean, yeah, the state can do whatever they want.
Then how, if I'm going to open up a store, a pot shop, how am I going to get my supply other than my 6 plants? In other words, if the state says, no, you can't do it, I'm only relying on that, and then we have to go through the not-for-profit co-op, but there's no money there.
Well, it's going to depend. There's going to be a lot of details that are going to come out in this regulatory process. And not only that, but there's also local regulations that are going to have to be contended with. And local zoning boards are notoriously difficult to deal with, putting restrictions on signage, square footage, location to various places like schools. So there's actually a lot of regulatory hoops that I think you're right to be nervous about.
Can a municipality stop this from happening altogether? Can they just say no?
Yes.
Really?
They can ban it if they would like, yes. They'd have to have, some sort of referred initiative.
It has to be referred? The city council can't
The city council could do it themselves as well.
Okay.
Either way.
And several towns have discussed moratoriums in the last week, actually.
Yeah, because that'll keep the pot out. All right, so your guesses, who's gonna ban it? Fort Collins? Maybe not.
It passed in Larimer County. I mean, it'd be a big affront to their voters there.
Really? Colorado Springs?
Passed narrowly there as well.
Where did it pass?
That's the second largest medical marijuana market in the state after Denver, is Colorado Springs.
Well, you got to focus on the family there. You need some relief. What? Did it fail in any county?
It did.
Where?
A number of counties in the Eastern Plains, Mesa County, Dolores County, Delta County.
Those are the farming counties. They're the ones.
They should love it with the hemp provision.
Explain the hemp provision, because I don't think most people understand.
So the timeline for the hemp provision is a year later. Hemp is a product that can be used for numerous applications. That's made from the same plant that marijuana comes from. There's no psychoactive properties in hemp itself. It can be made used to be made. Textiles can be made from it, plastics, food, I mean, a number of stuff.
They used to make rope out of it, they used to make paper out of it, but you can't smoke it, right?
That's right, no.
Right. But it's still illegal.
I mean, I suppose you could smoke it, but it wouldn't do anything but give you a bad cough and a headache, probably.
Trust me, I tried pot once. That's exactly what happened. Scotch is so much nicer. All right. What is it that either one of you would want if you had a message to give to the legislature about this? And as they're thinking about it, saying, it's here, it's real, what is it you want from them? Let's start over here. If there was one guiding principle?
I think the guiding principle that I would encourage restraint in how they set up the language, in how high they want to set the tax rate, and in how they encourage the governor to execute the regulatory function. The black market exists, it's enormous. $35 billion in marijuana was grown in the US last year, more than corn and wheat combined. So they're competing with a very effective black market. So I would encourage them to try to allow legitimacy first, and then later on, if they want to put in more control, then leave that for later. But for now, they need to get legitimate, get revenue coming in, open up stores, and then go from there.
What do you say to those in the legislature representing people who don't want this, don't want it to happen, and feel that the legislature is the last stop to make some sense out of this?
Well, I mean, I would encourage those people to rethink their thoughts on the war on drugs.
They're not going to do that.
Well, then they can voice their opinion at the ballot box, try to run another constitutional amendment.
But it's here, and it's here to stay.
It's here, it's in the Constitution, and for good reason. The war on drugs is an unmitigated disaster, and I think it's good that Coloradans and the majority of Americans are changing their opinion on drug policy.
What guiding principle for the legislature?
I agree with Harris wholeheartedly with everything that Harris had to say, and I hope that many of those members that maybe will have second thoughts about their views on the war on drugs and marijuana, and I hope that we set up some sort of regulatory framework that is reasonable. This is how our democracy works. States are the incubators of change here, and change comes from the bottom up in our democracy. And this is happening, and it's going to start happening across the nation. Gallup initially started polling if people preferred marijuana legalization in the 60s. Something like 13% said they did. That number is now around 50%. So this is something that is happening, and I think Colorado has a great opportunity to set the right kind of regulations and set a model for the rest of the country.
Let's talk about some of the ancillary issues that are bound to pop up. Colorado had what used to be a very reasonable drinking and driving law. We actually had more stringent laws than what are now on the books. We had different levels of blood alcohol content level, and if you were at this level, it was this. If it was this level, it was that. Even at a very low level, you were committing a crime. And now that's been basically federalized because the feds have said, if you want your money back for roads, you have to do what we tell you. Let's talk a little bit about drinking and driving. If we're going to regulate this like alcohol, how do you regulate toking and driving? How do you regulate pot? I know that THC stays in your system, so if you're getting tested for it, you can test positive long after you're being affected by it. How are we going to handle that?
Under Amendment 64, driving under the influence of marijuana is still 100% legal as it is now. We have over 90% conviction rate for those caught driving under the influence of marijuana in Colorado.
Well, let me be more specific. When it's booze, it's easy. You breathe into something, you pee into something, or you take a blood sample, and there's a number. You hit that number, you're good. You get higher than that number, you're bad, and there it goes. We don't have the science yet to know what that is with THC, and we don't know how long it lasts. It's as if you got drunk one night, but 3 days later you still tested that you were drunk. Pot has that impact, does it not?
It does. And I don't think there's any of us around want to see more impaired drivers because of marijuana. But the fact is, and we will get there, the technology. We will figure out a way to measure if people are impaired or not by driving under influence. When we repealed alcohol prohibition in the early 1930s, the breathalyzer was not invented then, but that didn't stop us. So technology will get there, and we will figure out a way to ensure that stoned drivers are not wreaking havoc on our streets.
Ensure is a strong word. I'm going to hold you to that one. There was a bill last year to set some THC levels. It failed. A lot of people on the pro-pot side said it was way too low. Your response?
So that bill set that 5 nanograms of THC, which is the main psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, per milliliter of blood. And you mentioned the main issue is that just because there's THC in your system doesn't mean you're stoned. So that was a very crude level. Even if someone were over 5, it doesn't mean that they're stoned right then. So it depends on the driver, right? And each person's body is different. Each person can handle the chemicals differently. But the other serious concern is that there's civil liberty issues with how is that blood going to be collected? Is it going to be collected in a safe way, an effective way?
Is it only blood, or is there a breathalyzer or a urine test? Is it blood?
So for that test specifically, that would be a blood test because it's measuring the amount of THC in the blood system. But there are other tests. None have been effective. There are salivary tests. I mean, there are a variety of other ways to see how much THC is in someone's system, but there's not an effective one. Fortunately, as was mentioned, it's already illegal. It will still be illegal, and all of the methods and mechanisms that law enforcement currently uses, they'll keep using. Come
up with some sort of test that the cops turn on some Grateful Dead, and if you start swaying to it, you get the ticket, which you should get anyway.
Yeah, they could do that. We'll see. Hey, entrepreneurs, this is a signal for entrepreneurs. There's a huge need. Get inventing. You might not be very popular with some people, but you will be popular with families and children and people that want safe roads, which is most people.
There's a couple aspects here that really intrigue me. The first one is federalism, in that now a lot of people on the left who have loved the pot issue, wanted to legalize pot, who are liberals, now are faced with a very interesting states' rights issue. If they don't understand the importance of states' rights, now they have to. because while it is legal and in our Constitution, in our very sovereign state of Colorado, the feds have said it's illegal. And it'll be interesting to see if the liberals who love Obamacare and all the other regulatory state that comes down from the top, if they're going to agree with federalism this way, as well as a lot of people on the right who've been calling for states' rights, if they're going to stand up and say, well, we don't like it, but it's our state right to do it. What is the fight between Colorado and the feds, and what's that going to look like? You want to take that first?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've already seen, Representative Diana DeGette, a true blue Democrat from Denver, has offered legislation to amend parts of the Controlled Substances Act, which is federal legislation governing drug policy. And she's amended it to basically allow for states to be able to regulate marijuana as they see fit. And she has bipartisan support. Congressman Mike Kaufman. Hey, it's a move. You were asking if you want to see if Democrats, it's a move. There's Democrats.
That's a move. It ain't going to happen.
It's a states' right issue. She has it's a 10th Amendment piece of legislation that she's offered
Assuming that doesn't jive through the Republican Congress, which I bet it won't, what happens?
On the federal level?
Yeah, on the federal level.
Well, so we're still waiting to hear. We have to wait to hear what the Department of Justice is going to say and what the president is going to say. We're waiting to hear.
So really, you're in a situation where either we need to have, if a legal situation doesn't occur and the change of law happens, really there's one of two things that are going to happen. One, there'll have to be a lawsuit that works its way all the way up, perhaps to the Supreme Court, that decides this issue, or we have to hope that the feds don't enforce their law. How were they when it came to medical marijuana?
They've been pretty good. I mean, you hear a lot of things that they're cracking down on medical marijuana in the state. It's really not true. They were cracking down on some very bad players that were violating the law. They've allowed medical marijuana laws to stand in the books since 1996 in now 18 different states. I mean, I think that they're going to take a similar approach to these two initiatives now. Our initiative, and Washington also passed a very similar initiative.
I'm a little nervous about this because you're saying, well, they'll be okay, but still the power of law is potentially on their side. I'm worried about that.
It is, and it depends on who you ask about the medical marijuana issue. So today, which it'll be airing later, but today there was a medical marijuana grower in Montana that was sentenced to 80 years in prison for growing. And he's providing to a medical store in Montana where it's legal. The Obama administration has been as heavy-handed, if not heavier-handed, than the Bush administration on medicinal dispensaries in California. Colorado's fortunate because there's still a perception that it's a swing state, and I think that's inoculating us from some of these rates.
That's an amazing thought. I never thought of that.
I mean, you see restrictions specifically. The really tricky ones are on banking. So dispensaries in California often have a significant amount of cash on hand in the store because they're not allowed to participate in the normal banking system. And so they're at huge risk. And for whatever reason, despite their vulnerability, they've been able to keep operating. So there is pretty significant operational risk for medical, and that will be true for recreational.
Haven't medical marijuana places had the same problem here, that banks will not allow them to have accounts? The same thing could happen here.
So definitely. And even in states where medical marijuana is legalized, it's considered by some, it's described as a gray market rather than like a legalized, fully functioning black market. I would say there's hope in the national statistics. So 2/3 of Americans, according to Angus Reid, Public Opinion, think the war on drugs is a failure, and 2/3 expect marijuana to be legal within 10 years. So it's not just a couple states that think, hey, maybe pot's cool, but 2/3 of Americans, specifically, regardless of their opinion on whether or not marijuana is good, expect it to be legal within the next decade. So.
And regardless of those banking issues, the market will find a way, and it has found a way in the medical marijuana industry, and these people have found a way, those entrepreneurs in medical marijuana have found a way to deal with their money, regardless of the fact that banks with FDIC insurance won't take them.
This is going to be a brand new market. Nobody knows what to expect. It's going to be really fun to watch. And I'm thinking about Colorado having a history, particularly with breweries and other distilleries. I mean, we've got wineries, we've got microbrews, we've got both Coors and Budweiser, two of the largest beer manufacturers here. What does this look like? Go ahead 10 years from now, all right? We work out a lot of these problems and things go along the way you think. What does it settle down to? Because this next couple of years are going to be tumultuous, but what does it settle down to?
I don't know. It's going to be exciting, as you say. It's going to be extremely exciting to see what happens. I mean, Colorado is at the forefront of this issue, so it's very possible we could be the Napa Valley of marijuana at some point.
We are the Napa Valley of beer. I mean, quite seriously. People from around the world know Colorado as a beer capital, not just because of great Coors beer, but because of all the microbrews as well. So we're going to, who's going to get in early on this?
I don't know. I mean, but it'd be great to see both of those. I would love to see both a good, thriving microbrewery and a boutique marijuana market.
I'm thinking of Philip Morris deciding to start a joint business here.
Well, I've actually spoken with a couple folks at tobacco companies, and I think what's likely going to happen is you're going to see small-scale operations growing, cultivating strains, and developing a business market supply chain here. And then when the risk goes down for the larger multinational companies to step in, then they'll buy up some strains, they'll buy up some providers. I don't know, but that's what I think is probably going to happen, because for larger companies, there's significant risk for them to put capital in right now. So I think that's probably the one thing. But the other really important thing is that there will be fewer people in jail, fewer law enforcement officers focusing on marijuana, and instead focusing on kidnapping, murder, rape. So there's a broad law enforcement
market. You don't have to
market.
sell it. You guys already won.
Well, it's important for people to know that there's a broad law enforcement market that's going to change too. Not only recreational marijuana, but the broader marketplace will be safer for Coloradans because police and judges and prosecutors are focusing on other things.
In the next couple of years, how many grow shops are going to start? Places where you can buy hydroponic equipment for your flowers.
But I think Harris brings the right point. And that's the other point, is that we're going to save a ton of money on our prison populations here in Colorado. There's going to be all this extra tax revenue. There's going to be law enforcement savings. I think it's going to be nothing but good things for the state of Colorado.
But you don't seem to understand the obvious implosion that's about to happen. You can't miss it. You've got legalized pot in Colorado, but yet Hostess Twinkies are now out of business. There is no way this is going to work in the long term. Harris, thank you. Joe, thank you, and thank you. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. Look for us at independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Tell a friend. We'll see you next week.